So Pastor Miller, thanks again for giving me a little bit of your time. And I want to get back to our early conversation about this comparison between the music and preaching and your spiritual leadership. And I just want to touch on one thing that I really appreciate you about, because I see you as sort of the Art Blakey of preaching. And the reason I say that is because, like Art Blakey, you surround yourself with a lot of young up-and-coming preachers. And Brown Memorial seems to be sort of like the incubator for people who want to come up and be spiritual leaders and church leaders. And where did that spirit come from?
I think naturally it's in all of our best interest to be surrounded by people that have positive energy, passionate energy that suggests that the days ahead of us are brighter than the days that are past us. That's always been something that I appreciated, but that was, I guess, in an organized, systematic sense, reintroduced to me when I was a youth minister up in Abyssinian Baptist Church.
Yeah.
Because Reverend Butts, who has been the pastor there since 1991.
Yeah,
1991. He has always prided himself on having young ministers,
right,
not just to help him do the work of the church, but also to introduce them to opportunities.
Right.
You know, for example, you mentioned yesterday, it was our 20th pastoral anniversary, and our guest preacher was Reggie Backus,
right,
who spent time at Abyssinian. But even before him, Etong Young, she's from Houston, Texas. She's there at Abyssinian. Reverend Violet Deese, who works at Fifth Avenue United Methodist Church in the city right now.
Right.
D. Darrell Griffith, who's at Oakdale Covenant Church in Chicago, Illinois. Kevin Johnson in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Raphael Warnock, Ebenezer Baptist Church, who's now United States Senator. So many young preachers, Darren Ferguson, who's out in East Orange, New Jersey. So Reverend Butch kind of prided himself not just on needing the help to run a church of that ilk and of that notoriety, but to introduce them to opportunities beyond Abyssinian Baptist Church.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to my next question. What brought you to Abyssinian Baptist Church?
I thought it was hard for me to get to Abyssinian because Dr. Butts was just that busy.
Exactly.
And at the time, he was involved with this debate concerning rap music.
Right, I remember that.
And gangster rap. And there were actually a couple of talk shows where he would debate, I think one with Ice-T.
Exactly, I remember that.
And he received a lot of criticism. He went out in the street and burned
CDs,
burned
on the
CDs,
on the street,
cassettes and CDs.
Yeah.
And so I guess there's two perspectives one can have at activism like that. But what interested me was that it was relevant.
Right.
It wasn't a church that was just open on Sundays. It was a church that had youth programs. Exactly. It had programs for seniors. It had housing for seniors. And so I've always, if I was going to follow this call to preach, I wanted to be relevant and engage in activity that was going to help people or to inspire people, not just on a Sunday.
Exactly.
And it turned out that I've had family history in that church as well. My father's mother, my paternal grandmother, moved from South Carolina to Harlem.
Yeah.
And she was actually married at Abyssinian Baptist Church by Adam Clayton Powell Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the 1920s.
Wow.
So in addition to the relevance of that ministry, there was there was history there as well. She was a member of that church.
Yeah. Pastor Miller, when people talk about, like practical matters like separation of church and state, I really didn't know what that meant except for, what was taught in school. Mm-hmm. But as a practical matter, growing up as a kid, my congressman was Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who was the pastor at Abyssinia. So it was always a political connection there. And he was not only, a world-renowned pastor, but he was also a really iconic civil rights leader.
Right.
And, people talk about, the church, and people make disparaging remarks about the church. And I know Henry Louis Gates just did a documentary about, the church and, the church's history. What's your perspective about the church and the church's history in the context of black people, civil rights, and basically our relationship with the church, and what people say, black people are enslaved by religion. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's there's so many ways to unpack that query. That's something we can talk about for a long time. I think one feature of the black church in America is that it has taken the good parts, the formidable parts of what has happened in America, and we've embraced it, and it has kind of discarded the negative aspects, or even the evil aspects of mainline Protestantism in America. So you mentioned the separation between church and state. That is exclusively a part of the Baptist tradition.
Right.
Because, of course, the Baptist denomination in America started in Rhode Island by Roger Williams, who was trying to get away from the strict adherence from Massachusetts and the puritanical interpretation of the Bible, which pervaded all aspects of life.
Right.
And so I think, Roger Williams said, no, there's got to be some type of separation. Everything that we do civically can't be based on the Bible. And that was what led to the Baptist denomination. And I think one reason why you see so many black pastors run for office is because our African heritage did not make that separation between church and state.
I'm glad you made that distinction, Pastor Miller.
Right, that's part of the African tradition is not to demarcate spirituality from civic life, but to see everything holistically.
Right.
And I think that's something that has led to the black church actually becoming the conscience of America. I would say that in every civil rights movement in America, whether it was in the 1960s or whether it was during Reconstruction or even before that, with people like Nat Turner in the 1800s, it was part and parcel a moral movement just as much as it was a civic movement, because for us as Africans throughout the diaspora, we just didn't see that separation. And I think when people disparage, to use your word, the black church, a lot of times, and there are reasons, because no church is perfect, and there are a lot of misdeeds that some pastors have engaged in, and that's real, and that's something that we have to hold ourselves accountable to. But at the same time, up until now, every civic movement that has gained progress for America and American life, not just for black people, but for all Americans, has been rooted in some religious moral movement.
Right. The
church, the Nation of Islam. And what concerns me now is that when you look at black protest, part and parcel with the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think is a great thing, but I do have a critique, and the critique is they've been somewhat intentional to leave religion out of that movement.
Yeah.
Now, there are exceptions, I could be wrong, but based on what I see and based on the people that I've talked to within that movement, the church doesn't have much to do with it.
Yeah.
And some of the leaders of that movement don't want the church to have much to do with it. It is actually a part of, I wouldn't say a charter, because the Black Lives Matter movement is a very loosely constructed movement.
Right. It's like a franchise.
But part of the franchise says that they don't believe in what they call charismatic leadership.
Yeah.
So they would not want to have one person as a part of the movement who leads the movement, which I can understand. But at the same time, that movement is bereft of a spiritual center.
Yeah.
And so it remains to be seen what the outcome is going to be. They have made great strides as far as popular culture, particularly in sports. I think the Black Lives Matter movement has positively influenced sports leagues like the NBA.
Right.
To do things that it had not done before. I mean, I was watching the All-Star game 2 weeks ago, and we never heard that the proceeds from All-Star Weekend would go to support HBCUs.
Right.
Which is a great thing.
Absolutely.
But I would like to see more of an effort for both the church to make inroads to the Black Lives Matter movement and vice versa. Because all of us are fighting for the same things. I think it's just a major difference on the roads we take to get there.
Exactly. But as a historical matter, the modern civil rights music that took place in the United States, a lot of that took place in the church.
Right.
Whether it was C.T. Vivian as a pastor, or just civil rights leaders, whether it was James Bevel, Diane Nash, Ella Baker, who most of those civil rights training and march trainings took place in basements of churches.
That's right.
So I just want to fast forward to 2020, before the pandemic. You know, Brown Memorial, we're not a church that's too shy to take it to the streets.
Right.
And you have been somewhat of an activist preacher, and I want you to boldly and proudly talk about that experience with our church.
We were very enthusiastic about being out in the street and protesting, whether it was on the Upper East Side at Barney's, when we heard that they were racially profiling its customers of color,
right?
Or the development right down the block, Atlantic Yards, which is now called Pacific Park. I believe they changed the name.
Yeah.
And my experience has been, because not only because it's New York City, which is tough within itself.
Right.
But because we have tried to confront the negative vestiges of capitalism,
Right.
unbridled capitalism in America, we often found ourselves on the losing end. We weren't against the Nets coming to Brooklyn. You know, as we said earlier, we love basketball, but that deal wasn't just about basketball. It was really about 22 acres of land being given to a developer who was politically connected to the degree where he paid less for the land than other developers were willing to pay for it, but because of his connections, because of who he knew, he got the land.
Exactly.
And so we're always sensitive to political deals like that.
Right.
That end up moving our people and displacing our people out of neighborhoods. That part of Brooklyn is a part of Brooklyn where every other ethnic group besides black people are increasing as far as moving in.
Right.
We're the only category of ethnicity that population is decreasing.
Right.
And we have to ask, why is that?
Yeah.
How do we address that? How do we have elected officials that say they're working in the best interests of our neighbors, and this is the case?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we always try to look at what policy negatively affects us, because of course, if it negatively affects us, it negatively affects the church.
Exactly.
And so there's a link, and we always try to pick our battles based on fairness. And even if we don't think we can win, sometimes it's worth it just to get into the fight to make your voice known.
Absolutely. And one of the things about that, about the Barclays Center and the surrounding properties, is that a lot of that land was acquired through eminent domain. Mm-hmm. And it caused a major battle. And I remember when the Barclays first opened and someone gave me a free ticket to a fight. In fact, it was a boxing match. And I says, oh no, man, I can't go to this fight because, I mean, you give me this ticket, I walk up to the front gate and, Brown Memorial might be out there protesting. And I don't really want to be on the wrong side of that fight, So yes, Pastor Miller, you've really been on the forefront of a lot of issues here in in Clinton Hill and in Brooklyn overall. And so where do you think this neighborhood is going in 2020? Our church is right in the center of historic Clinton Hill. It's woven into the fabric of this community. And but now we're seeing this community change. And I want you to tell me what your thoughts are about that.
Right. For our church to remain populated, to remain active and relevant, we have to become what I call a magnetic ministry. We'd have to offer programs that are irresistible to the point where people who just don't live in the neighborhood would come. We would attract members from Flatbush, East New York, Brownsville, Canarsie, South Brooklyn, Bushwick, if we have programs that meet the needs of families. Yeah. And this is why sometimes at our church meetings, it somewhat becomes frustrating sometimes because there are some people who want to guard the church, who want to guard the physical aspect of the church. And I understand it. But at the same time, if a church does not have programs that attract young people and young families and senior citizens, then the church is not going to last anyway. Yeah. So even if a child bumps into a wall with some crayons or marks something that he or she is not supposed to mark, it's worth it because we're providing a service for that child and for that child's parents, and maybe even for that child's grandparents. Absolutely. Teaching them how to become better equipped as far as technology. Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to that as the pandemic subsides, because this can't last forever. Exactly. And there's going to come a time very soon where we're going to be expected to resurrect these programs and start new programs and start new policy fights. One thing that I'm looking forward to now, because there is a person in the White House who seems to be sensitive to working families to have adequate housing, is to try to make inroads with both local elected officials and officials on the national level to change the formula for what we call average median income. Exactly. AMI. Exactly. Which determines whether housing is really affordable or not. Exactly. And because the politics is what they are right now, we're going to take another shot at it. And that's something that I'm looking forward to working with our congressmen, Hakeem Jeffries, the senators, Senator Chuck Schumer, and of course, the president, hoping that they can localize the AMI, because as you well know, Brother Kevin, the way that formula is constructed now, the average median income is based on the 5 boroughs of New York City,
Exactly.
Westchester, Rockland County, Nassau, and Suffolk County,
Exactly.
which really doesn't reflect the real salary that an average working family makes in central Brooklyn.
In central Brooklyn. Exactly.
And only until that formula is localized, we'll see buildings that go up that say affordable housing, but they won't be affordable in all actuality.
Yeah. And finally, Pastor Miller, now that we're in this post-pandemic world, and I think communally, spiritually, and socially, I think we're entering in a brand new paradigm. And I want you to tell me where you think faith is going to go going forward. How do you think faith will change in this new post-pandemic world?
Right. I think that there's an ominous, looming, impending paradox as far as the world in which we're living right now. On one hand, we enjoy more comfort, we enjoy more luxury. We're living in an age where you call post-pandemic, but we're living in an age of concierge where these new housing developments that are going up now don't look like apartments, they look like hotels.
Yeah, yeah.
And everything is just laid out for an individual. Technology makes things easier. You don't have to go shopping for your groceries if you don't need to, if you don't want to. Everything is brought to your door. So on one hand, there are benefits of living in the time in which we're living right now, but the backside, and I think the negative aspect of our time right now, because of cell phones, which allow us to depend on ourselves, we can run our own office from our cell phones. There's not as much authentic interaction with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that has been a major cause for psychological harm and consequential mental challenges. I wouldn't say mental illness for all, but I think the age in which we're living right now, it's almost like Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities.
Yeah, yeah.
It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. So I think dealing with the negative aspects of our post-pandemic concierge culture is faith being the instrument that would help people regulate their minds, their emotions, the psychology of themselves. And I don't see it. I don't see people getting by looking at celebrities and living vicariously through celebrities and through the royal family and through people who are rich and famous. That's not going to work.
Exactly.
I think a poll was done. Close to 70% of young people now want to be famous, but don't know what they want to be famous for.
Exactly.
So that means no piano lessons, but you want to be famous.
Exactly.
No singing lessons, no acting lessons, no art lessons, but you want to be famous.
Exactly.
I think that's a dangerous proposition, which leads itself to a sense of failure, a sense of pessimism, and a sense of negativity.
Yeah.
So I think faith is the overarching instrument that helps us to guard us through these things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Pastor Mill, I want to say thank you so very much for giving me your time. I know you're very, very busy, but again, I want to thank you. You know, about a couple of weeks ago, I got in contact with Pastor Howard Wright. He was the pastor of the church when I first became part of the church-going community in the late 70s. And I told Pastor Wright the other day, I said, you know, I wasn't ready in 1979 for your pastoral leadership, but I appreciate it. And I told him that being a member here at Brown Memorial Baptist Church for the past 11 years has been a true blessing to me. And being under your pastoral leadership, Pastor Miller, has been such a wonderful lesson for me, a wonderful experience for me, and I look forward to your pastoral leadership going forward.
I appreciate it, Brother Kevin. And in the same vein, I think you bring so much to the Brown Memorial Baptist Church. Your sense of history, not just through jazz, but your sense that the world functioned before you came along.
Yeah.
And I think the way you document our services and through your podcast is something that allows us to continue to tell the story. And that's an asset that I appreciate that you bring to our ministry and to our church.
Well, thank you so very much, Pastor Miller, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
God willing. Thank you.